Hello, hello. My name is JayVay. This is the 2008 Culture of Contact Mythology Is Reality panel. We originally were going to do two panels, one with just experiencers and one with the some of the presenters who were not experiencers, but time just didn't permit. In fact, we went massively over with this little presentation, and the tape runs out before I got a chance to well, I wouldn't have had a chance to switch over because I was on stage. So my apologies to Mark Brinkerhoff. So I'm introducing people, so I won't bother giving you their names again here, except to say that two people jump up on stage who I don't introduce. To the far, to what would be your left, is Mark Brinkerhoff, who's a 1970s, early 80s contactee. And the man who comes and sits next to me to your right is Bill Birnes, the UFO hunter and owner of UFO Magazine. Unfortunately, I don't have this framed for him. I guess I don't know if I wasn't expecting him to come up, or if I just framed it poorly, but I probably just framed it poorly. In any event, you'll hear him speaking and you might not be able to see him so well. That's me speaking now. I'm the fat guy who kind of looks like Slimer from the real Ghostbusters. Yeah. Anyway, here is the panel discussion from Culture of Contact 2008, and I will be splicing in footage from the art show that happened in Hoboken, New Jersey, while this was going on in Jersey City, New Jersey. All right, awesome, excellent. Everybody, the panel, everybody. Allison, and I don't remember your last name. Alice Haggerty, who is an experiencer. We have Peter Robbins, who you heard earlier, also an experiencer. No. Well, you saw you. I did. Okay. I didn't just out you. Okay. Richard Dolan, who you heard this morning. Brent Hoff, who is an experiencer. And do I just list resumes? No. He's an experiencer extraordinaire. Melissa Reed, who is the art curator and the co-host of this with me, also an experiencer. Farrier Dozu, you just heard, fantastic. An experiencer. And Tiokasin Ghosthorse, I don't know if you want to be introduced as an experiencer. But fantastic. Having on the panel, if you missed it last night, you need to buy his CD. It's out there. Fantastically as a Ghosthorse. And David Biedny, who you heard earlier, also an experiencer. So, what I wanted to do, normally with these kind of things, we have, the guest speakers, get up here and take questions from the audience, and we're going to do that. But what I wanted to do first was get a sense of, from the experiencers, of the stuff that we've heard in the last 3 days. Positive, the negative, the indifferent, all of it. Does any of it form a cohesive picture for anyone here? Is there anyone who wants to take that? Nobody. Next question. Okay.
I don't know. I think it forms a cohesive picture. I think the cohesive picture is that you have assembled a wonderful group of people together to share with everyone their experiences.
Okay.
How about that? That's not what you want to hear. No,
whatever it is, I just need the answer. Yeah. And Tiokasin, specifically you, I was thinking, what is it like for you to hear stuff about abduction, contacts, and all that, considering what you had said, about Native Americans don't get abducted, and do you think that the function of language that you spoke about is part of the problem in the way that we communicate and perceive with these beings or this intelligence or whatever it is? Do you think that is a problem for us that is not a factor for you, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you, everybody, and I hope I'm speaking loud enough. I speak English, which is a second language to me. but I also speak Lakota, the first language of this continent or this land. And I've grown up with both languages, and there is a marked difference in both how we rationally and metaphorically explain our existence on this earth, and how we get along or we don't get along. And in my language, Lakota, we can't say that there was a problem with this conference and how we explain things, but in English, I would say there is a difference in how we emote, the language we use, which is a very rational language. I always say that came maybe 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, someplace out of Greece. And a metaphorical language, which Lakota is, a relational language actually, based on non-hierarchy, based on not having a concept of death or domination, not having a word for I or me, not having other words as ownership, war, it goes on, guilt, sin, blame, hope, all those emotive or languages are words that we don't need in Lakota, because we're dealing with reality, a present awareness, consciousness, and since we don't have death, we can't say ghosts or anybody is coming back from the dead or anything like that. Since everything, 90% of our language is essentially based on living and life and action. So everything is alive to us, everything is positive, everything is moving, molecular structure is intact, whether or not we see it or feel it, sense it, smell it through our senses, that we are limited in this language because of the programming of rationality, and because it's a language of prove it to me, rather than accepting it, knowing it, and experiencing it. So, being an experiencer, actually I was abducted. I like to tell people I was abducted when I was 7 years old by these aliens, and these aliens were called Catholic priests. And what happened is they took me out of that way of being a Lakota, and I was put into boarding schools and made to speak the language I'm speaking now. And out of that, I found two ways of reasoning, I would say. One is having to do a lot with spiritual, metaphorical Lakota, which is coming from the intuitive values of all life that we appreciate. And the one that I speak now to you in English, it doesn't hold it in a place of Wakam, we say, is a sacred energy, and it tends to view spirituality in a sense of negativity, that it's not real, that it doesn't exist, that there is a dogma, there is a God someplace out there. So it explains and accepts more religiosity and salvation point mentalities, like somebody out there is going to come and save us. It's a sense of we remove our power from awareness right here, and we put it out there in hoping somebody else comes down, such as UFOs, to save us. And again, I explain our origin stories as we are star people, we are the star nations, that's who we are, and we already know that. But those five senses that we are explained in English limit us from understanding that, because our minds that we put and hold trust in this language tends to not fully realize, because of the programming, that there is a metaphorical way of thinking, which is we are all born with it here, but somehow we were programmed out of that way of thinking into prove-it mentality and I and me mentality, and chosen ones, chosen peoples, indigo nations, and all of these things. And this is a basic philosophy. Not all Native people, but as a Lakota person, I know that is still with us, and that I indeed include what the panelists here are talking about, and I will stretch what they have and read their articles and review their DVDs and be able to include that within the Lakota mindset, and because also we don't have the word for exclusion in our language. So I just wanted to say that. I hope that answered your question.
Just on a, I have a podcast, so I'm used to interviewing people, so now I'm like in interview mode. But just really quickly, when you say there's no language for war and ownership and that sort of stuff, okay, maybe you clarified it. It's not all tribes. It's just certain tribes that don't, because there certainly was war.
Yeah, there was in Lakota. I'm not any other about Lakota. We have a thing called counting coup. In fact, it was a dishonor to kill somebody. So it's like tag, you're it, you're out of the game. And that's the base. That's how far we could go. The war started in a chain reaction, and that's the stories that American history puts down in words that we continue that, and that we're savage-like. Indeed, we did have war in our third world. We live in our fourth world now as Native people. We did have technology. We had flying machines. We had all of those bombs and things that the society has now, this modern world so-called. But we almost destroyed ourselves. And so you hear about lost cities and lost cultures. They got smart and they went back into the jungle, into the woods, and they realized their place in the universe was having to do more with getting along with Earth rather than trying to dominate or go further than that. So, and I asked my elders about why don't we have a word for war? And they said, well, because we evolved past it, because we remember in our stories coming from ancient times when all the land of all the continents was one, and that we argued, and that was a time that we knew about war. So that's part of the explanation.
Thank you.
So, talking about the ancient war that you had in your third world, as a native thing, who were you fighting against then? Who was the enemy?
The enemy, the story goes that all the land was once, and all peoples of all ideologies, I guess, and languages started to argue, and we didn't agree, and we started to fight each other, and we fought in a vigorous war and destroyed half of who we all are. And then Mother Earth stepped in as a being, as our mother, as all mothers do, try to bring peace. So she divided us up into different parts of the world, known now as continents. And then part of that was, people say Atlanteans or whatever, you know, we don't claim that. We just know that there was a place like that, that we were removed from a place of divisiveness. And part of that led to the I and me mentality, that we were better than, not equal to. So the language devolved into the I and me mentality. We only have our souls separate from the soul, and we need saving, a salvation point mentality. Even now today, because we don't have I and me, our bodies are in the soul. You are my responsibility. We are not removed from that soul, rather than I have a right to something. And that's where the ownership part comes into play.
I have a question for Brent, which is, you know, you're sort of, and maybe if you feel like sharing some of your story with the audience, that would be great.
Sure.
But just as someone who is sort of new to dealing with this,
yeah,
and very generous in flying out here from California just to partake in this panel discussion and hang out, thank you very much. What is it like hearing all of this stuff and taking all of this stuff in for you?
It's really interesting and in a lot of cases hard to digest a little bit, because I'm here. My interest in this came out of a sighting that I had with my girlfriend, and that was a very physical, very close sighting. Nothing about it seemed interdimensional or to call in any other. No awareness, there was no emotional or mental aspect of it for me. It was purely a physical observance. And so being very new to this and meeting a lot of you guys here and hearing stories about how damn complicated this thing can become, it's been but it's truly hard to digest. I am almost overwhelmed by all of the different perspectives.
Does anyone feel more, when you hear all these multiple takes on the subject, and anyone can feel this, Do you ever feel delusional, or do you feel that in some way it's going to make sense period?
Just for myself, it is an interesting aspect of it that if I did not have a witness with me at the same time, I might have doubted myself. I might have actually wondered if my eyes would have been playing tricks on me for 5 minutes, which is, seems fun. What's that?
Can you tell us what happened? What was the experience?
Sure. Oh, sure. Just briefly, I was on my roof one night on Friday night, and I just walked up on my roof and just cracked my first beer of the evening, important to note. and the 6 silver spheres just moved right over my shoulder, about 10 feet away, that big, just passed by, kind of, clumped together, and stopped right over the house across the street. At that point, my girlfriend came up on the roof, and I wildly said, look, tell me those are balloons. Tell me those are silver balloons there. I saw them. They were very metallic looking, very physical, very heavy seeming. And they began moving around a little bit and then orbiting. They started orbiting one of the spheres. All of the spheres started orbiting one of the spheres in the middle. That was obviously not very balloon-like. And I may not know everything about balloons. I know that was a very un-balloon-like thing. And then, as I'm walking, I'm still kind of like, just like going like this to my poor girlfriend, shaking at me, like, you're seeing this, right? You're seeing this. And
by the way, please don't disturb Richard Dolan.
It's a very, my unwilling prop in this story. And then after orbiting one faster and faster, they all started shooting off. The ones in the orbit shooting off, one right by my head, and faster, completely silent, very similar to David Biedny's, completely silent the whole time, and just all different directions, shooting off, leaving one in the middle. That one in the middle just sat there. There was one not knowing what else to do. I waved. Thing shot straight up. But the waving was certainly, it did not see me. I did not feel any sort of connection or anything. It was just a very odd experience that I pretty much counted down to some sort of really poorly placed military exercise for a long period of time until the O'Hare incident, until I saw that a big silver ball.
Where in LA was this?
This was in San Francisco, in North Beach, San Francisco. But
I have a question.
Sure.
Can I have a question?
Go ahead.
Did you go back inside off of the roof about 2 hours, 3 hours later?
No, I don't.
Realize you had missing time?
No missing time or anything like that. No face burns or any of the other sort of things. No, nothing like that.
Did you say they were very, very small, or like?
Yeah, they were about that size right there. And so I began looking, once I heard about the O'Hare thing, I began looking. That's how I stumbled across you, Jeremy, and you, David, and you, Richard, your work, and just trying to look, I just started Googling, silver balls and silver spears.
I'm all over Google with silver balls and spears.
Yeah, which is some very disturbing sights. Anyone else?
Silver ball?
Jeremy's question.
Wait, I have one.
I don't know. I don't remember. We can go on to the next question. That's fine.
Does it rock you?
What's that?
You said something like, has this...
Oh yeah. Well, just how does it affect you? I had asked him specifically because I know that he is sort of new in dealing with this for himself. To hear all the
Okay, I will say really quick. It's really interesting about perception of this, learning the perception, other people's perception of this, and how what we believe of each other's stories, and just people. The most amazing thing about it is what I've learned about people's relationships, our relationships with each other, what we believe and what we know of each other. It's interesting to tell people something that is, frankly, potentially threatening, to thing to say to a friend, to a family, to anyone, and it really causes a lot of conflict with some people, and what they're willing to believe is just interesting to me. That's been the most interesting.
Okay,
Mind-blowing.
On a similar note to Rich Dolan and then to Bill Birnes, who was trying to say here. Thank you. So as people who have not had these sorts of experiences and who believe enough in them to dedicate as much time to them as you do, is there a line that you draw? Is there a thing that's too overboard, or at this point, are you just, you hear everything and just let it wash over you? I mean, how does that work for you?
I'm going to answer your question and probably surprise you. There's a few people in here that I've told this story to, and I want to share it with everyone here. I've had now what I believe are 2, maybe 3 UFO sightings personally. So I'll tell you about the 3. The first one was 1999. I was just figuring this out. I'm supposed to be the historian of this, and I can't remember the exact date of the sighting that I had. Okay. I was at home in Rochester, New York. It was May. I was with my son, who I believe was about 3 years old at the time, so he was 12 now. So I mean, May of '99. Walking back with him from a grocery store, and I saw a glint in the side of my eye. Now, we live right near an airport. We see aircraft every day. So what I saw on this perfectly clear day of May, no clouds in this section of the sky, was this intensely bright object. I assumed it was an aircraft, but the thing about it was, to this day, the most brightly reflecting thing that I've ever seen in the daytime, other than the sun. So it was very bright. It caught my eye, and I stopped, and I was looking at it, and my son was yay big, watching me look at this thing. And I was curious about it. I thought, well, what? That's a really brightly reflecting aircraft. So I was waiting so I could see a shape of it, and I couldn't really make out any shape. And it looked like it was hovering, but of course I thought, well, maybe it's just coming straight to me, and that's an illusion. So I watched and watched and watched, and meanwhile my son was getting nervous because he's watching his father turn into a statue right in front of the house. So he said, "Daddy, Daddy," and I pointed. I actually pointed to this object because I didn't want to lose it. Because, here's the thing, for some very illogical reason, I had in my mind that if I took my eyes off this, I was going to lose it. And in fact, there's really no reason that I should have thought this, because there was nowhere for it to have gone. And even if it had lost the reflection, I'm thinking, I should still be able to see it, because it wasn't that high. I mean, how could you not see, right, an aircraft in the sky at 10,000 or 15,000 feet? That's about what this was, I think. But I pointed to it. I turned for half a second to reassure my son that I was not a statue. And I turned back and that thing was gone. Gone. So that freaked me a little bit. I had another experience. My wife and my son later had their own sighting, which I wasn't present at, but they described it very, very clearly, very interesting. I was with my wife and our daughter a year ago. Again, we were in our neighborhood. And again, there was this mental connection that I can't explain. It was at night this time. And I said and we had our dog, and our son was sleeping at a buddy's house. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO? And I looked straight up. And this object was zipping across the sky, faster than any aircraft. Now, maybe it was a meteorite, except that it went into, there was a very thin, wispy layer of clouds, and it went into those clouds and never came out. Karen, my wife, did not see this. Elaine did, our daughter saw this. She looked up, and it really got her nervous, because she saw more colors in this object than I did. She had better eyesight than I did. And so that's twice that for me personally, I had an experience that I'm feeling that there's a connection between that and my head. Now maybe there's always the logical part of me that tries to think, well, maybe there's another explanation. Maybe there is, but that's 2. So, and then the third one, I was talking with David Biedny earlier today. I took 3 photographs of what I think could be something very unusual. I've not shown it almost to anybody. I showed it to Bruce McAdoo. Bruce thought it was interesting. He couldn't identify it. I said, interesting. But what it was, I was in D.C. It was right after the first X conference that Steve Bassett held. It was the day after that, and I was playing tours with my wife, and we had another friend of ours in D.C. I was taking pictures. And there was a shot of the American flag, and I wanted a good shot of the American flag blowing in the wind. I didn't like the first 2 pictures, so I took 3, all within 60 seconds. Didn't notice anything until I took this image home and saw it on the screen, of course. And there's this black object moving in a zigzag. And in the last image, it's like this dot. The first image is the only one that you can really enlarge and see anything. And it doesn't, Karen thinks it may be a bird, maybe. I'm going to show it to David. I really want to know what you think. It doesn't look like a bird to me. It doesn't look like anything that I can identify. But there it was. It's in motion. And there's 3 of them, so it's kind of neat. You can sort of track the motion of this. The thing I'd like to answer, and then I can be done, is studying this now for more than a decade. It has rocked my world in every way that I can think of. I came into this as Mr. Hyper-conservative, thinking, I don't want to know about abductions. I don't want to know about cattle mutilations. I don't want to know about crop circles. I only want to know about, is there historical reality to this? Is our military? That was my whole thing. So there's a problem with that philosophy. That's like going to the beach and saying, I'm only going to go up into my ankle into the water. I'm not going to swim. Well, you know, you stay in the water long enough, and eventually you're going to swim. And so I've been swimming. And the best analogy that I can think about what this has done to my reality, it's similar in a way, like in the movie The Matrix, where Morpheus gives Neo that red pill. And he says, you know, now when you take this, I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole and show you how far, right? Well, except for one difference. I think I've taken about 10 red pills in the last decade. Because every year I take another red pill. And I think, oh, now I get it. And that lasts for about a year. And then I'm thinking, there's something not right. And then there's another, and then another. And now it's so far. Studying, there's a number of phenomena, a number of things you can study that'll take you there. And UFOs did it for me. So now I'm at a point where, like, if I fly somewhere, I can't talk to people. Because, like, if I sit next to someone on the airplane, they're like, oh, well, what do you do? And then what do I say? Well, I study UFO. Well, I'm okay with that, but then the problem is, how do I take people from, you know, from their Excel spreadsheet that they're working on to the head that I've got to, like, where my reality is? I have no idea. I don't know how to do that. You have to go back to kindergarten level. And so what happens is, you know, you go from here, then here, then here, then here. And then the next thing you know, or then there's the family reunion, and that's the same problem. How do I talk to people? How do I talk to my cousins or my aunts who love the fact that I'm some author guy, but they don't really want to go to the places that I've been going. So I think that our reality is so misrepresented as to be fictitiously represented now, and that's why we don't have cable. We don't watch TV anymore in our houses. We can't. I don't want to do it, and I'm still at the point where I haven't figured out this reality. I haven't figured it out.
Very good. And I have the same sort of question with Bill, but it's a little different for you in the sense that you're now a UFO hunter and you are on TV, and so you actually, I would assume, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you have to sort of sensationalize or take sensationalistic cases and try to make them sensational for the viewing public. So is there less of a line, do you think, for someone like you than for someone like Rich Dolan in terms of what you find to be acceptable in this?
Actually, it's funny. I can really empathize with Richard a great deal about what do you do on a plane? You know, I mean, what do you say to somebody? In my case, it's kind of funny. Before I answer Jeremy's question, it's that I'll get on a plane and will be, for the past, since October of last year, I basically lived on Southwest, United, and U.S. Airways, and lived on it. It's unbelievable. And you basically get into a mode of trying to shut down when you're on an airplane. It's the last thing you want. And in some cases, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that I've learned about network television and even a cable network show and what you have to do in terms of managing crew and finances. It's a lot to go into. But one thing you learn is that in some cases, you're getting in a plane, you're flying in a plane, you're getting off at the airport, you're meeting your equipment, you're meeting your local production assistants, and going right to a set and you're shooting, so there's no wardrobe changes. And so I'll get on a plane in kind of the field uniform, which is either a leather jacket, a leather flight jacket, or my pea coat, those awful sunglasses, and believe me, you cannot see through them, and this hat. And that's it. When you're on a plane, there's no way of hiding. I could sit on the toilet for the whole flight. I mean, so I totally, completely, it's a story that Harold Burke, one of my writers, he wrote the book Flying Saucers 101 for UFO Magazine Publications. He told me, he said that he would get on a plane and he'd be wearing his Flying Saucers 101 shirt and his alien tie. And he's an abductee, or a contactee, which I'd rather say. And he would say that on every single flight, and this is absolutely true, this came to me, he would say somebody would tell him about a UFO experience. And on these flights, I have had pilots come out of a cockpit on Southwest Airlines to tell me their UFO encounter stories that they would never tell to the FAA and never report. I've had flight attendants, and the eerie thing is, like this last flight, coming back from, God, where was I? Wherever I was, I came back from Las Vegas, and flying back to Philly, and so I'm sitting in the plane, and it's I forget, Southwest, I think, and this flight attendant comes up, and she's very solicitous, she's very nice. We're in the air, and she leans over and says, I know who you are, and do you believe all those stories of alien contact? And I said, well, you know, it's funny. Some of them, I tend to give more credence than not, and I'll go into give you, Jeremy, Mike, kind of like what we do on the show, because we do have like a checklist of how to check off witnesses. And she said, do you think they're true? And I said, some of them are true, a lot of them are true, some of them might be something else. I mean, I can tell you about the one case where in the, I think, third or fourth episode, maybe the third episode from the first season, we had this one case where Yvonne Smith did a regression. Yvonne Smith, you will know her from, she's from Sirius, and she did a regression, and we were filming it for the show, and in the regression, I also chair the Sunrise Community Counseling Center in downtown LA, which is a mental health center, and I'm the chairman, and I have a psychology background, and the red flags in the regression session, and I'm listening to every single red, I write true crime, all the red flags for child abuse. Everyone goes up. Dark room, secret room, I can't go there. My mother is in the room, my mother can't protect me, she's frozen. My grandmother actually can't talk. Oh, it's this old man, he's laughing at me, it's an alien, it's an alien. Well, you know the alien's a screen memory. And this guy is actually flipping out on the couch, telling us the story. And so where do you draw the line between an actual case of screen memory child abuse, where his mind is put, and he says, I see a screen, I can't get to him, and I'm so angry. And you're going, duh, there's the screen. So where do you draw the line between screen memory, which is so obvious, and actual encounter with some kind of otherworldly being? You know, where do you draw that line? That's the question, and it really is a tough question. So this flight attendant leans over, and as she's talking, it's always, well, I've heard this, gradually the I've heard this becomes I've. And she tells me this phenomenal story, which I believe, okay, I believe it, of little creatures in her room when she was a child. What did they look like? They had shiny heads. They were bugs. I'm afraid of bugs. And she's going into why she's pathologically afraid of bugs. And her fear of bugs is just, it's like off the chart, right? Off the chart. She sees a bug, she freezes. She can't control it, it's something deep down. And so she tells the story. And you want to say, I'll give you Yvonne Smith's phone number, you know, call her. I'll give you Bud Hopkins' phone number, call him. Anybody, just call him. And so and so as she's talking, the other flight attendant walks up and says, when I was 8 years old in Texas, in West Texas, a giant flying saucer hovered over our cornfield. And I stood there, And I thought I was only there for 5 minutes. And yet, it was an hour had passed. And my aunt yelled at me for staying there and for going away. My aunt yelled at me for going away. Now, I'm telling you, if I hear these stories once a day, I hear these stories 10 times a day. Answer Jeremy's specific question, and it's this. We've probably interviewed, both for UFO Magazine over the course of 10 years, and for UFO Hunters over the course of a year, hundreds, 300-400 witnesses. What do we look for? Where do we draw the line? Well, for the show, we shoot, and this will answer your question as well. We will shoot 100 to 125 hours of video for 47 minutes of on-screen time. Okay? Now, a lot of that 125 hours of video is totally repetitious, and a lot of it is you'll do, and you have a director of photography, and this is network, and it's serious stuff. You're shooting with $150,000 cameras. It's not a handy cam. It's not a little, not to put them down, but these are big HD standard studio cameras. And so you will run a lot of video, and you'll do a lot of takes in the same scene. And by a take, what I mean is, can you say that again? And this time you'll have to move the camera because the sun has moved. So it's not as though you want the best story. It's that imagine that there's a manual camera setting. And for HD, a manual camera setting is like, are you locked into something like beyond the pale? It's so rigid. It's like black letter law. They've made a manual camera setting. So the camera's not going to adjust when the sun moves. The sun moves. A cloud goes over the sun. Well, that whole shot goes out because you've got to cut that shot into something else, and they need the sun, so you'll do a retake. So that's a lot of that going on. So you'll interview these witnesses. Will a person's story change over the course of 3 takes? If a person's story changes dramatically, oh, I forgot. They told me they were from blank. Now, did the person really forget, or is the story simply getting better? You find that in our field, and it is our field, there are people who gradually embellish a story to make it more attractive for you. That's a red flag. That's absolutely a red flag for me. You will find people who will say the same story in the same language over again. Then it's the whole Manchurian Candidate thing where Frank Sinatra wakes up and so-and-so wakes up and Joey Bishop, I don't know who else wakes up, and he gets me say the same thing, he and so is the best, we saved my life, best person I ever knew. Then, something almost put that there. So there's a whole Manchurian Candidate-esque take going on here. So you really have to say, does the story change? Is the story plausible? Is there any kind of corroborating evidence for the story? A friend, a parent, a document, a this, a that. Is there any physical trace evidence for the story? And physical trace evidence can come in the oddest ways. A classic example coming up in this season, the Whit Kecksburg. Big Kecksburg case, right? 1965, object crash lands into kind of a river trough in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, 30 minutes out of Pittsburgh. Big case. Immediately, within an hour, some sort of military, quasi-military units on the scene. Units are threatening people from the local radio station. John Murphy from the local radio station in Pennsylvania wants to go on the air. He gets threatened. A witness sees him getting threatened in the radio booth. He's giving out his notes, his tapes. He finally goes on the air, and the story, it becomes this kind of like a dribblish story that's nowhere near the story the witness is told. Who are the witnesses talking to him? Well, we spoke to those witnesses. You're already saying witnesses. And they tell a remarkable story. I saw this, I was on the scene, I was working on my 1962 Chevy Corvair, I drove there, I saw this. So I'm sitting right between me and Farrah. That's how far this object was, kind kind of a nose cone-shaped object, acorn-shaped object, kind of embedded in the dirt, troughed up a whole bunch of dirt, and it's there and it's glowing blue, kind of like the scene from War of the Worlds last night, and he stands there and he's looking at it, right? And so that's one. Somebody else, other angle, says the same thing. How do we know they're kind of telling the truth from memory from 43 years ago? They both came forward to the MUFON investigator whose name Stan Gordon. Stan Gordon. Thank you, Richard. Stan Gordon, I forget. Within 1 year apart, 10 years later or 15 years later, and they both go to the exact same spot from two entirely different directions. High corroboration, Jeremy, high corroboration for that. And they tell the exact same story. One of the witnesses, Jim, has had all kinds of cancer. His life has been messed with. People have been screwing with him for years. So I give that absolutely high credibility. Somebody else tells a story that makes absolutely no sense. We tend to say, fine, you may have seen something, I believe you believe, I don't think you're trying to hoax us, but that will probably not make it to the air.
Okay, thank you. And, Dave Biedny, you want to address it?
Yeah, Bill, when you're talking about, how you determine credibility and what you look for in an interview, on the Paracast, we had Jim Sparks, who has some pretty extraordinary claims about the experiences he says he's had. I had listened to a few interviews that he had done to get an idea for his approach. And what I found was that I was listening to a guy reciting a script. Basically, it's a script he'd memorized. And it was incredibly obvious to me that this was what was going on. So he came on our show, and he was going into a script, and we let him for a while. And at some point, I said, you know, Jim, I have a question for you. You say you were on these craft for 8, 9 hours at a time, you're teaching the outfit, all this other stuff. So let me ask you something. When did you pee? And I could hear him go, oh. The script went out the window. When did you urinate? You're sitting in a room for 9 hours. What'd you do? How'd you do your business? And he responded by saying, well, you know, I've always been really good at keeping it in. We're done. For me, that was it. Because I broke a script. Now, I was talking about this with, I think with you, Brent, with someone else in the audience who was supposed to be up here and isn't. I won't mention his name, Mike. And, I'm sorry. So, but the thing is that the two of you, I think, were pointing out, well, you know, couldn't he have just said, well, I don't know. I don't know why he didn't do that. That's a good question, but he didn't. He had to come back with an answer. He couldn't say, I don't know. And honestly, when someone says everything except I don't know, I wonder about that. It's like, do you know everything about what you went through? Now, if you say I don't know, that's an honest answer. I don't know. But he went into this whole other thing about, oh, I'm really good at keeping it in. And then he went and said something, and I don't know if there are kids in the audience, but apparently at the end of all these things, there was genetic material extraction. With an elaborate story around it. And he said, well, I guess it all happened then. Now, not to make this a physiology class, but A and B don't mix. So, you know, that didn't hold true. But that was just to address that, because, you know, I've had a chance now to interview a number of people. And it's one of these things where you have to go on your intuition to some extent. It's sort of like when, maybe I'm a native New Yorker, this is the deal. I know when someone's selling me a line. I can hear it, I can feel it. I've been on this earth long enough to sort of have a handle for when someone's, you know, selling a story. And that's part of what I go on when I interview people. There was something else I wanted to address with Richard Dolan talking about photographic evidence. Now, I've looked at a lot of images, and there's something I've said on the Paracast, I want to say it just here, I think it needs to be said. You look at a photograph, and you go through a list of what it is. Is it an airplane? No. Is it a bird? No. Is it a meteor or a satellite? No. You go down the list, and you cross off all the things that something is. What are you left with? A UFO. It's an unidentified flying object. Now, here's the important part about it. People want an answer that's got more granular detail than that. They want something more. They want reaffirmation. Well, is it an alien craft? Well, I don't know. It's a UFO. And what does that mean? When we take off all the things that we know, the picture isn't. Now we have a UFO. Okay, it's an unidentified flying object. What does the photo tell us about the unidentified flying object? Do we know where it came from? No. Do we know what it's doing here? Well, if we see the thing picking water up out of a lake, well, we know it's picking up water out of a lake. Does that give us any idea behind the meta motive of the thing? No. Do we know what's in it? No. Do we know what it's made of? Well, if we see certain characteristics that are normally associated with a metallic surface, gee, it's made of something, it's made of metal. Well, no, it's made of something metallic, or better yet, it looks like it's metal. Does that mean it is metal? Is a very dangerous word. Whenever I hear discussions of this topic, you know, the extraterrestrial UFOs, those two terms do not belong together. They don't. Because we don't know where these things come from. Well, they fly up into the air. And? Well, they fly up into space. And? Do you know where it goes after that? No, you don't. So, in discussing this, and especially in having discussions with people who are not as immersed in the field as I suspect everybody else that's here is, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that this has become a belief system for a lot of people. And like I said before, you can believe whatever you want, but for people who are out there who maybe want to have a discussion about this topic with, you know, you go to the family reunion, or you're on the plane, and Bill, do you wear the hat on the plane?
I wear a different hat on.
Okay, all right. Let's say if you wear that hat on the plane, it's all over.
Then you're asking for trouble.
Just wondering.
It's designed for history.
Okay, all right. Because I'd be good sitting next to you going, what does that mean? I think I know what that means because 90% of people know what the UFO is, or what the term means. So it's very important that when we're going to have discussions about this, that we keep it real. Okay.
Thank you. So I think we were probably way over time. So I will just ask anyone who has not spoken if they want to say anything, or better yet, a better question is probably, what question would you have liked to have been asked?
That's good. That's like
Mark and Ellen. I'm not a speaker like everybody else, so this is a little difficult for me. My experiences started when I was 4 years old, playing with rainbows. And I thought that was odd. You know, you can't play with a rainbow, it disappears. But this didn't disappear. Then at 7 years old, I had diphtheria. I was dying, and my mother knew I was dying, so she sat by my bed all night. But during the night, someone came in, took me through a closed window and into a spaceship. And there I was put into a blue tube of light, liquid light, and healed. And I was told that I had a purpose in life for them. And that purpose was to give them children, hybrid children. I did this at least 7 times. I was abducted at least 100 times, sometimes once a week, sometimes even more than that. Each time I would go on board, I would be physically examined. I would be shown screens of the future, devastation, and given names of people to save during the devastation. I didn't know why. I still don't know why. If anyone has the answers, please tell me, because I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I don't have any of those sort of reproductive memories that a lot of people have. I have snips of things, but the one very vivid and odd at the same time thing that happened to me was lying in bed in the East Village. And this, you know, I hadn't gone to bed. It wasn't like I was asleep. I just literally went and lay down and felt this pressure up in my nasal cavity and could feel and almost hear, you know, inside my ears, it snapping. Like, and then it snapped. And I felt, and I don't even know how to describe this, just a reverberation throughout my skull. It felt like my skull was shaking. And I thought I was dying. I thought I maybe had an aneurysm and this was it, I'm dead. But no, what happened was, what snapped with it into existence was this really bad, like almost Atari-looking 1980s video graphic. And this is, what year is this, like 99, I think, or 2000? So it was a green 3D image of the Earth. It was a green, it was made out of grid lines. And what I thought was North America, you know, it's rotating as the Earth is wont to do. Snow from the top, just like a quick freeze. And then, boom, it was over. And the image was crackling, as if electricity, as if it were an electrical image that were beamed into me or something. And I don't know how to make sense of that, except that, you know, ever since then, you know, prior to that, of course, I've had concerns over nature and, you know, what we're doing to the Earth. But that was very specific, and it hasn't happened. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I don't know what to make of that stuff, you know? I don't know, and I don't even know really what to make of why it needs to come in that way. Why does there need to be this dramatic fear that happens with it? Why does there need to be, well, I guess someone had answered it already, maybe Dave, about, you know, when you're faced with the unknown, you have no reference point for it, so of course, naturally there's fear. That's probably the answer. But why does it have to be this weird Atari graphic from the 80s, you know, infiltrating my brain? Like, why does it have to have something completely off that would make it almost silly? Make me sound stupid saying it out loud. And why do we all share these similar stories in terms of nature going haywire and hybrids, even though I don't have that as far as I know, but a number of people do. Why is that?
Why, I will tell you.
Excellent.
Just a thought, as you neared the end there, the idea of language having a power and being holographic, perhaps, having an energy. And Tiokasin said last night that maybe it's a good thing for us to learn different languages or understand that there's energy in our words and how we communicate. And so how do you voice this? Perhaps the communication that's going on with this experience comes through as symbols. And there's a language of symbols in the experience that perhaps we can learn to interpret. Maybe the experience is very alive on lots of levels. And so through the filter of your human self and your everyday self, our everyday selves, symbols come in that are relative to our experiences. And though they may seem silly on the surface, maybe there's something very powerful in these odd things that come along. And there's an attempt going on to communicate on both sides. And just, yeah. I'd like to ask some questions.
Well, actually, before you do that, can Dave said he had a follow-up.
Just one thing about
Sure.
that. The human brain is a symbolic processing computer. Everything that we do, the entire way that we interact with the external world is through a stream of symbols that we have been conditioned to understand, and we have the ability to then also deploy those symbols. And when you're talking about seeing these weird images, like getting this weird graphic, right? So, not
not to get, this is a sort of an involved topic, but your hardware and your software, you're both, if you look at a human as a computer system. And your software is basically a collection of experiences, imprints, impressions. Everything that you do in terms of understanding the world around you is parsed, computer terminology. It's processed through the experiences you had. If you get information that has no reference to what you already are and you already know, you don't know what to do with it. In fact, you don't even know to recognize it. So perhaps, I don't know, but maybe it's a possibility, maybe even a probability, that whatever this is, it communicates with us based on symbolic language we already have. And it has to manipulate that in order to create the potential to extend the language. But in order to have any kind of communication, there has to be a common basis. And I think that part of the problem here is that whatever this is so different than us, that it is struggling to essentially downshift to be able to have any kind of meaningful interaction with us. And that downshifting is expressed as imagery, symbols that you perceive that are sort of connected to what your thoughts are capable of, but then sort of not, because part of it is coming from inside of you, and part of it is external stimulation triggering that. So I think that creates the confusion, and I also think that very might well be the source of the high weirdness. It's lack of parity, to use another computer term.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we gotta make this sort of quick because we're very over.
Through all this complexity, my feeling is that we have to get to the simple, and that's to have a sense of wonder and find the child within in all of this, and that dreaded word, get in tune with the higher energy that perhaps is love, and just have fun with this and enjoy communicating moment to moment as we go through daily life with this energy. Whether or not you're getting any kind of physical evidence back or whatnot, or understand this in a technical way or even a scientific way, why can't we just start feeling some sort of joy in all of this? And perhaps maybe Alice may not agree with all of that, and yet I think maybe she can also speak to some of that, even though she's had difficulty in this experience. And then I hope Mark will share some thoughts about some things to do. Yeah.
What was the question again? In all of the great
difficulty in your experience, I figure. But you've shared with me a little bit about how incredibly important it is in your life too, and on your path, and how it's helped you.
I believe there's a higher purpose in life that we don't always know about. You know, the aliens are here for a reason. They're a dying race, and we're helping them out. That's what it seems to me. It's just, go ahead.
Oh, what you said is very interesting now. You said that they're a dying race, and I feel that they need something that we have, okay?
Yeah, what we
they are
have
receiving
is a
it
soul,
from us.
but they don't have a soul.
Yeah.
We have a soul, and they're trying to recreate a soul.
Okay, so history shows that they have been very much interested in us, at least in the last 6,000 years, maybe more. Okay, at least in my country, official history goes back to 6,000 years ago, and our history starts with the extraterrestrial beings. So I have been repeating this in every conference. This is interesting. They have been doing the same things in my country, in South America, in North America, in Australia, everywhere. So the process is always same. They always come from the closed windows, just like your case. They take us somewhere, they give us something, they receive us from something. But why nothing has changed in the last 6,000 years? Why the same thing has been repeating and repeating thousands of years? If they were a dying race at the beginning, didn't they find a cure, or didn't they heal themselves, or didn't they finish their job here? Why the same things are going on? I mean, maybe you don't have the answer, but this is my question to everybody.
Well, and actually, I'm being told we've got to wrap this up, so we're going to leave it on that rhetorical question.
Yeah, we want to hear from Mark. Two minutes, 3 minutes.
All right, well, then Mark.
Mark will wrap it up.
Mark, please make it brief. And you can talk to Mark outside.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, everybody, for letting me be part of this. It's been 22 years since I came back out here. This is my first time back to be a part of this panel. I was asked a few weeks ago by Melissa and Jeremy. I've known Peter for 30 years, and he knew the investigators that worked with me from the SBI. My whole life kind of reads like a sci-fi novel, if you don't agree. The thing is, I remember before coming here, before being born, and my family documented everything I told them before that. I had many experiences on board, physically, as well as out of body or soul travel. I understand what Alice has had done to her. I've heard of the same type of stories. And she's correct, they are a dying race. They came from another place so far away. What I had understood from the beings I've talked with is that they are searching for genetics that work with them to help their bodies survive longer, because they've lived in space so long that their genetics are kind of going extinct. They are that old a race. But there's other species that look similar to them. And they don't give you a whole story on this. All I know is they told me when I was young, because I asked the question about Betty Hill. They said, we know of those beings, we're not of those beings, and don't pay attention to them because you don't want to draw them near you. And I didn't even understand what they meant by that, but they meant telepathically. They told me, if you ever see a dark red object, don't focus to it with thoughts. They were trying to tell me that is somehow related to that type of race of beings. I've never had an experience with negative aliens, or we call them aliens. They call themselves ancient ones. They've been here for millions of years, the ones I've met. They're ancient, they're races. They're on a higher dimension. They're 10 to 12 feet tall. And the one that I've met, that I had contacts with, was 8 to 9 feet tall. I have drawings that drew them, but these beings telepathically still communicate to me. They tell me when to go out, when to look up, and I'll see something. So I can't always guarantee something's going to happen. But when something does happen, there's a frequency or feeling that goes with it. And before I came to this panel tonight, when I was asked, is it possible, is this what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to come back and talk about this at all? And I had information outside my living room window of orbs and a triangle. And they kept coming back and doing it with the thing that day, just a couple weeks ago. So that was my answer. I said, okay, I'll come out and I'll say one more time what I've done in the past, and that's it. I know it's so hard to believe, but everybody, we're all here, we all have an experience. We're all part of the one, the creator, magnificent infinite being.
So that's it. That's all I got. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little something. I hope you walk away from this realizing that this isn't all delusional people and, backwater hicks and, all that sort of stuff that you see on TV. we don't all agree with each other, and, you know, maybe one or two of us in that panel is delusional, who knows? But I tend to think that abduction slash experiencer slash contactee cases follow the same pattern as UFO cases, where probably about 90% of them are misidentifications, dreams, sleep paralysis, you know, that sort of thing. But there's still that, you know, between 1 and 10% that are not. And for those, this demands serious scrutiny, I think. And I think you got a taste of that here. So, there you go. Use your discerning mind and get on it, because if any of us are telling the truth and not misidentifying and not delusional, that's all it takes. It just takes the one for this to be the most important topic of our lives.